and we're honored to welcome one of the most respected business leaders in the Middle East, indeed the world. He's a founder and chairman of Damac Properties, Hussain Sajwani, a very respected gentleman.
2 weeks before returning to office, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has his eyes on the Middle East and business interests that are storied to him, but new to the White House. This one in particular stars one of the biggest business names in the UAE, Damac Properties.
And I'm thrilled to announce today that Damac will be investing at least $20 billion over a very short period of time into the United States, and they may go double or even somewhat more than double that amount of money. It's a great thing.
Emirati businessman Hussain Sajwani found Damac in 2002. It's now one of the most prominent real estate developers in the region. Damac reported a $2.4 billion revenue in 2023 and was expected to nearly double it in 2024. In 2021, it launched its Edgnex brand, focusing on digital infrastructure through assets like data centers with a repertoire of operations in 10 countries. Now, it's moving stateside.
We are a company operating in more than 20 countries around the world. For the last 4 years, we've been waiting for this moment.
The $20 billion investment announced at Mar A Lago last week will see the delivery of data centers, buildings used to house all kinds of computer systems, in phases. Damac and Trump said the first phase will focus on 8 U.S. states in the Sunbelt and Midwest regions, places including Arizona and Illinois. The projects promise to make leaps for data use in the realms of technology, finance, healthcare, and retail to create what Damac called a ripple effect that attracts more businesses to data center hubs. This latest investment deepens ties that the two established nearly a decade ago. It's a testament to what's come to be, a characteristic trait of a Trump presidency. A mesh between his personal business interests and national dealings via his role in the White House. But what does this move mean for Middle East investors and for sectors like technology, space, and EVs? Today, we're hearing from our own business reporter Farid Rahman and an analyst specializing in Middle Eastern and global geopolitics, Ryan Bole, on what to know and expect just days ahead of Trump's inauguration. I'm Salim Saeed, business editor here at The National, and this is Business Extra. Farid, thanks for joining us. What do we know about this Trump-Sajwani relationship?
Yeah, sure. Donald Trump and Hussain Sajwani, they have a long-standing business relationship. This goes way back in 2013, where they partnered together to start a Trump-branded golf course in Dubai.
It just feels good. This is a really great course,
which was opened in 2017 as a centerpiece of Damac Hills, a gated community of luxury homes in Dubai. Apart from these, Donald Trump's sons, Eric and Donald Trump Jr., also attended the wedding of Mr. Sajwani's daughter way back in 2018 in Dubai. And Mr. Hussain Sajwani has been visiting Mar A Lago during Trump's first term. So they have a strong personal relationship as well as very strong business ties going back to many years.
This great gentleman brought us. He's a tremendous man. He's got a tremendous company, Damac.
What other involvement does Trump have in the Middle East in terms of his own business partnerships, and what's significant about them and about this one in particular?
Trump has other projects as well as in the Middle East region, especially Trump Organization, which Donald Trump owns. It has projects apart from Dubai. It is also investing in partnership with other companies, especially in Oman and Dubai and Saudi Arabia.
What does this $20 billion deal entail?
Damac has announced that they're going to build 2,000 megawatts capacity over the next 4 years, largely in 8 different states in the U.S., including Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma, Louisiana, as well as Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana. Mr. Sajwani's investment, as well as one made by SoftBank last month, this signals a rapid shift in foreign investments in the U.S. Following Mr. Trump's election. It's a shift in investment because this brings into the limelight Trump's association with Elon Musk, whose interest in technology sector is actually leading to a huge interest from global investors to invest in the technology sector. But the 20 billion investment is going to be huge, especially in the data centers field.
Farid, thanks so much. With us now is Ryan Bohl, Senior Middle East and North African Analyst at the RAIN Network, who tells us some more about what this all means for US-UAE relations under a second Trump administration. Ryan, thanks for coming on. It's great to have you here. Starting with this Trump-Sajwani relationship, which is more personal, what does that tell us about future business dealings between the US and UAE, but also more broadly about the foreign economic partnerships between the US and parts of the Middle East during Trump's second term?
Well, and I think it's important to characterize the kind of business people that Trump attracts and associates himself with tend to be people very similar to him, where they are kind of high risk, high reward type folks. They are exploratory in the way that they approach investment in general and business in general. They're willing to try new things in many ways. And so I think that's reflective of many of his relationships that he's got with, people like Elon Musk, and the SoftBank as well is another one where it's, again, high risk, high reward type folks that start to say, we want to invest in America now that Trump is in charge, because we think he will lead an environment conducive to that high risk, high reward outcomes. And that broadly characterizes the type of investors that are most likely to be sitting at the Mar A Lago table with Donald Trump. On the other hand, many institutional investors and investors, just broadly speaking, do like, that Trump is pledging tax cuts for corporations. He was going to make sure that capital gains taxes and unrealized capital gains taxes, which was floated during the campaign, that isn't going to happen now. That creates a certain level of business certainty for them and allows them to make plans over a 4-year timeline, knowing that that's not going to happen under this administration. So deregulation, they always welcome. Tax cuts, they always welcome. And then Trump's personal touch, which is to be really tolerant of high risk behavior. And then in his first term, we got to remember, he was willing to bail out, important sectors like farmers and others that were affected negatively by his tariff program.
So we will ensure that our farmers get the relief they need. And very, very quick. So today I'm announcing that I have directed Secretary Perdue to provide $16 billion in assistance to America's farmers and ranchers. It all comes from China.
And that also is welcomed by certain types of investors who say, yeah, Trump may impose heavy tariffs, but he's going to also use the power of the federal government to mitigate some of the impact of that and to ensure that whatever economic downsides there are relatively marginal. And that gives them confidence in the economy going forward.
And I think you might have answered this already when identifying the commonality of high risk, high reward. But I mean, Damac is a luxury real estate company, right? It's worth noting Sajwani's apparent admittance to withholding investment until Trump's second term.
It's been amazing news for me and my family when he was elected in November. We've been waiting 4 years to increase our investments in U.S. to a very large amount of money. We are a company operating.
So in addition to Sajwani's personal investment, it seems like it was a combined investment between him as an individual and also the company. Can you describe the incentive for this investment from Sajwani / the UAE? Why is a real estate company investing in advanced tech?
Well, you can think of it from two angles, from the United States and from the Emirati angles. And on the American side, this is a win for your institutional investors. Any capital that's flowing into the United States is always a boost for them. Overall, that grows the pot and allows Wall Street to grow wealthier. The individual industries that get that investment, whether that's tech or real estate or anything else, also see a boost. But the United States also has a widening economic inequality problem. And it's probably only going to get worse under this administration because they don't have any policies to address it. They're still sticking with the old Reaganomics strategy, which is to just grow the pot and then have it trickle down on its own. That continues to be what their philosophy is. So it'll benefit investors and the better off and established and large businesses. They will do quite well from this dynamic. And then your middle classes, your lower classes, your working classes, they won't see it nearly as much. Now, there's on the Emirati side, Of course, Sajwani and anybody else working in the UAE is always implicitly linked to the Emirati government, in part because of this whole overall economic diversification strategy to get off of oil. Their success is the state's success. So Sajwani's investments in the United States provide returns that bring capital back to the United Arab Emirates, or allow for greater, diversification of the Emirati economy. That's overall a win for the Emirati state itself. But the more successful their investors are abroad, the better off that is for the UAE, and the closer it gets that country towards its non-hydrocarbon economic model that it's clearly seeking and is hoping to achieve by somewhere around 2050 or so.
And then is this something that you think is going to pick up even further?
I think the Saudis, of course, there will be plenty of Saudi investors that will be looking at it. Of course, Saudi Arabia's PIF, and I'd have to double check the exact figures, but they had a rough time in America's tech sector. They tended to buy high and sell low in a number of ways. So they may be a bit more conservative, purely based on balance sheet and concern about risk. But individual Saudi investors, I would expect to show up. Some Qatari and Kuwaiti ones might also show up. Anybody who's got capital in the region, who again has that personality of high risk, high reward, sees a lot of upside and opportunity in tech, particularly because of the Trump-Musk connection, the deregulation connection. If they believe that there's opportunity in there, I think that they will be, chomping at the bit to go forward. On the other hand, there are lots of Gulf investors who are, inherently conservative folks. They're not willing to do anything that's not a sure bet. And I think those folks will probably stay away from certain aspects of the United States. Tech is a roller coaster. They had a very good 4 years. The wealth of people like Zuckerberg and Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Meta, and Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and of course Elon Musk himself. They all saw their wealth tremendously increase over the past two presidential administrations. But it can't necessarily be assumed that that will continue. That it may stagnate or even decline over the next 4 years, because that's just the natural rhythm of business in the United States.
Tell us about the market for data centers. Has there been a spike in development lately, and why now?
Broadly speaking, the idea that we need more data centers over the next 4 years in an increasingly tech-driven economy is more or less a given. I think that under Sajwani, with the Trump administration, there's a belief that these data centers are not going to be running into, say, environmental regulations nearly as much. Some of these data centers are very water hungry, for example. That can be a real problem where some of them are being built in places like the American Southwest. But if the Trump administration is emphasizing the construction of data centers over, say, necessarily the controversies over environmentalism or water rights, that speeds along the process of constructing these facilities. And of course, there's other folks like, Zuckerberg, Musk, et cetera, are believing that their businesses are going to be scaled up over the next 4 years, and they'll be needing accompanying data centers to support aspects of their business during that time period. And so it is a bet that is based on, of course, assumptions. The assumptions are that you'll need more data centers over the next 4 years because the Trump administration is more pro-tech than the Biden administration necessarily was. And because the Trump administration is not as concerned about environmentalism, these data centers can be set up faster or more cheaply than they could have under Biden. Of course, those are all assumptions that may or may not be true as soon as reality hits these policy plans, because local governments have a say, city governments have a say, and environmentalist activists can still use the courts to slow this process down. But nevertheless, I think that's what's underpinning the belief that data centers are a good bet over the next 4 years.
Do you see this as staying between Trump and Sajwani, or do you think that UAE leaders will be getting involved with this as well?
I think it'll tend to be on the more business to business line. Now, of course, there's informal contacts. These folks all hang out. They go to the same areas. They go to the same majlis every once in a while. There will definitely be personal relationships that factor in. But I don't think the UAE government in and of itself will be giving directions as to where to invest or anything like that. It's about consensus. It's a consensus-based political economic model within the UAE that I think right now is pretty coherent as to what everybody is trying to do. They're all trying to find a way to keep the Emirates' status as a wealthy place without oil. And that sort of means that they have to adopt all the same tactics. So while the government will handle the diplomatic side and the political side, individual businesses will be encouraged to pursue policies and investments that fuel or support those political and diplomatic strategies. And I think there's an alignment there that is likely to last over the next 4 years.
Do you see any of this business relationship consensus trickling over into the diplomacy side? Like, do you think that there are going to be more major changes based on the, I guess, agreements and consensus, again, the word you used, between them?
Well, so the answer to that, and I think this is extremely unlikely, but the only way you could see that sort of political, diplomatic influence start to change some of the economic behavior of individual businessmen in the UAE is if there is some sort of rupture between the United States and the United Arab Emirates. It's hard for me to see the Trump administration becoming overtly critical of anything the Emirati government is doing diplomatically or strategically. And one of the tools that the Emiratis have, of course, is investments into the United States.
Isn't it strange that Trump is reliant on outsourcing this investment, given that with investment usually comes a bit of ownership of something that's considered very high security in the US?
Well, I think the way you can think about it with Trump is that Trump loves capital inflows, and he almost doesn't care where they come from. Almost. There's one country that he does care where they come from, which is China.
100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line. China. And you're not going to be able to sell those cars. China.
Anything that is China related is automatically toxic in Trump's eyes. That's what he laser focuses on. Otherwise, he doesn't mind if people are sending money to the United States. He thinks that's good for business and he'll welcome it wherever it's coming from. And I don't think he ever sees those risks of other companies or other countries trying to leverage those investments against Washington to change policy. I don't think that's something that he's ever mentioned or that he even necessarily thinks about, or that if it does come along, he tends to make the assumption that the U.S. is so big and so wealthy and so rich, it can put up with that leverage. And if a country wants to pull their investments, it's more fool them in his mind. So he doesn't see it as a threat, it doesn't seem.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ryan.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Business Extra. You can head to the business section at thenationalnews.com for more related coverage and subscribe to our new episodes every other Wednesday for the latest business and tech stories from the Middle East. This episode was produced by Yasmin Al-Taji, Dua Farid is our editor, and I'm your host, Salim Al-Said.